The Ashok Sani Distinguished Scholar in Residence Lecture is the highest honor awarded on an annual basis by NYU Stern. The lecture was endowed in the name of Ashok Sani, a distinguished graduate, successful entrepreneur, president of CGS Industries, and loyal supporter of NYU. Invited speakers are chosen because they represent the values that Ashok Sani upheld throughout his life: ethics, truth, peace, compassion, and the moral and social responsibilities of members of society. And they're chosen because they can share these values with the NYU Stern community. Each year, his family and the school come together to honor his life and legacy by bringing to our students distinguished voices speaking to matters of integrity and innovation in business. This year, the Ashok Sani speaker is Ruchira Gupta, whose work and life serve as a model of upholding these values, and who is someone we wish to honor and recognize at NYU Stern. Ruchira Gupta was only 10 years old when she decided to become a journalist. The newspaper she wanted to work for in Kolkata when she got a bit older refused to give her a job without a degree, so she started going to college in the daytime and working all evening. While on a work assignment in Nepal, she stumbled upon rows of villages with missing girls. When she asked the villagers about the girls, she learned that little girls as young as 12 years old were smuggled across the border and sold to brothels in India. She related the story of some of these women in a documentary called The Selling of Innocence, and won an Emmy for outstanding investigative journalism for that work. She then sifted beyond shining a light on this tragic situation to catalyze change. She quit journalism and started an NGO, Apne Aap, inside, I might not be pronouncing it right, but she'll correct, okay, inside the red light areas of India. Apne Aap's mission is to empower women and girls to exit systems of prostitution to create a world in which no human being is bought or sold. She began to work with the United Nations in Nepal, Thailand, Kosovo, Iran, and the USA. She has been awarded the French National Order of Merit, the Clinton Global Citizen Award, the UN NGO CSW Woman of Distinction Award, among other honors, for her contribution to the establishment of the UN Trafficking Fund for Survivors, the passage of the U.S. Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and her grassroots activism with Apne Aap. She also received a Doctor of Humane Letters degree from Smith College. She has written a book with Gloria Steinem, As If Women Matter, and edited 2 anthologies called River of Flesh and Renews Letters to Birju Babu. She occasionally teaches at New York University's Center for Global Affairs as a visiting faculty member, and the wonderful book that many of you will be able to take home with you, I Kick and I Fly, is her debut fiction novel. Join me in welcoming Ruchira Gupta as the Ashok Sani Lecturer of 2024.
Namaste. Thank you, Batia, for a wonderful introduction, and thank you to the Sani family for hosting this lecture and letting me talk about a subject that I care deeply and passionately about: human trafficking. Human trafficking is the second largest organized crime in the world today, second only to the arms trade, and the drug trade has now been surpassed by the human trafficking trade. More people are victimized by it every year than we can imagine. The numbers that we have at our disposal say that there are about 29 million people trapped in situations of human trafficking as I speak right now in our world today. The billions of dollars that traffickers generate from human trafficking is also now considered the second largest organized crime profit that I'm going to talk to you about. I stumbled upon the issue of human trafficking as a young journalist. I was walking through the hills of Nepal when I came across rows of villages which didn't have any girls from age 15 to 40. And this was 1996. And I began to ask the men who were sitting there drinking tea, playing cards, how this could be. And some of the men were sheepish, some were hostile, but a few answered. And they said, don't you know, they are all in Mumbai. And that was shocking to me, because Bombay was about 1,400 kilometers away, and these villages were remote hamlets in the Himalayas, even 2 hours away from the highway. So I couldn't understand how so many women and girls could end up in Bombay. Of course, I had to follow the trail. And as I followed the trail, I discovered this huge trafficking operation. There was the local village procurer who would be going into villages and offering parents who were poor and starving farmers a little money, maybe $100, $200, maximum $300, $400, and say, I will get your daughter a job in the big city, I will get her married. Sometimes even say that they would take her to the red light area and say, but she'll have a roof over her head and she'll send money back home. And the farmers were so isolated, they had no idea what they were doing, and they let the daughters go. From the procurer, as I followed the trail, I found that the procurers would cluster together a few girls and then take them to the border of India and Nepal. There were the corrupt border guards. Wink, wink, nod, nod, the girls were taken across the border. On the other side were the lodge keepers. And these were little shabby places, nothing fancy, you know, not five-star hotels, just made of tin and plastic sheets and a few bricks, but with a lock on the door. And here these girls were kept for a few days, beaten, subjugated, till their spirits were completely broken. And when they were ready to do anything, they were handed over to a set of transporters. These transporters would put them on buses, trains, trucks, taxis, and take them to the brothels of Calcutta, Bombay, Delhi. And I kept following the trail, and I ended up in Mumbai's red light district. And there I found little girls on display in cages. And this was something I had not expected or imagined. As a young woman who grew up in Calcutta, of some privilege, I had education, I had food at the table, I had a loving family, and my mother's family came from Bombay. So I used to go for summer holidays to Bombay, but I never knew about the existence of the red light area, which was just a few kilometers from my grandparents' home on Nepean Sea Street. So when I saw these girls in cages, the first thing, of course, I did was burst into tears. But then the sadness and the despair turned into anger, that how could this be? Why did this exist in my lifetime, in my generation? Because it wasn't one girl in a cage. There were lots of little girls locked up in tiny rooms in that crisscross of lanes of Kamtipura or Falkland Street, as some of us know, 12 lanes. And I was determined to do something about it. I didn't know how, but I was a journalist. So the first thing that I did was I decided to tell the story, break the silence, so that people would at least know the subject. They would know that this exists, and though it was a problem in plain sight, it was invisible. So I ended up making a documentary on the subject, and the making of the documentary itself was a life-changing and transformative experience, because I spent a lot of time in the brothels of Mumbai talking to the women who were in there, who they were, where they came from, what their hopes were, what their dream was, what their trauma was. And Milan, who's here, has met some of the women exactly like that in New York City and knows about the trauma that such victims experience. And as I got to know it, I finished the documentary, and I kept processing that something more needs to be done. I won an Emmy for Outstanding Investigative Journalism for the documentary. But when I was on stage and looking at an audience just like you at the Broadway Marquis Hotel, all I could see beyond the bright lights were not the shining faces or the clapping hands. All I could see were the eyes of the mothers who had broken their silence to tell me their story because they wanted a different future for their daughters. And so in that instance, I decided that I would use my Emmy not to build a career in journalism, but to make a difference. So I stepped off the stage and I turned to the lady who had given me the award. At that time, she was the US Secretary of State for Health, Donna Shalala. And I said, thank you for the award, and can you help me do more? And she said, what is that you want to do? And I said, I want the victims to get choices other than prostitution. I want prevention programs on a huge scale across the world. But also, I want the blame to be shifted from the victim to the perpetrator. I want those who are in the situation for no fault of their own, because somebody has taken advantage of their lack of choices, their vulnerability, to have investment in their basic needs so they have more choices. But I also want those who took advantage of these lack of choices, this vulnerability, to be punished. I want the traffickers to be punished. I want these men who are buying these girls to be punished. And somehow Donna Shalala liked what I said. I was just speaking literally from common sense. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a social worker at that moment, right? And so she said, what can I do? I said, introduce me to the UN. Maybe there are people in the UN who might be interested. Introduce me to senators and congressmen. Maybe there are people in the Senate and Congress who will be interested. She did, and I managed to show my documentary at the United Nations. And it was in the Dag Hammarskjöld Auditorium, and that's when I first met Dorchen Leidholt, who's sitting here right now in the audience, who's heading a program for Sanctuary for Families, and is also on the board of an organization that I sit with with her, called the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. And I showed this documentary to about 150 delegates from different countries across the world. And I did it with the help of two people that time in the Clinton administration. There was Malan Vervia, who was the chief of staff, and Ambassador Swanee Hunt. And because they were there with their full force and power standing on stage with me, I had clout. I had a movie to show what the problem was, and I leveraged. And I said that, here is this issue which I've talked about and shown in my movie, The Selling of Innocence. But, this is everywhere. It exists everywhere, and can we do something more about it? As I was showing the movie, of course, I was moving hearts and minds, but I was also making friends. I built a lot of friends and allies in that moment, who then came forward and became the family of choice that I've slowly grown over the years. And together we have worked to end sex trafficking. But also what happened was that led to my contributions and to the contributions of many people in the audience that day to the UN, which eventually led to the passage of what is now called the UN Protocol to End Trafficking in Persons, which is sort of the gold standard for the world now on trafficking issues and how they should amend their laws, each country, to meet those standards. It calls on countries to increase choices for women and girls who are vulnerable by investing in the basic needs of such vulnerable populations. It also calls on countries to address the demand, and it defines the crime of human trafficking. Now, you will think, what is human trafficking? As lay people who might think that it's people smuggling. But human trafficking is very different from people smuggling. It's not about people being taken across a border. That is just how sometimes people have to enter a country because there is war or famine or some kind of problem in their own country. Human trafficking is when a third party takes advantage of the vulnerability of certain populations for the deliberate purpose of exploitation. So they use force for coercion, but they also use abuse of a position of vulnerability. And that is really, really important for us to understand how human trafficking is different from migration and smuggling. And this is what we were able to define in the UN Protocol to End Trafficking. I was also able to do the same at the US Senate, again with the introductions from Donna Shalala. And we created a bipartisan bill, which is now called the Trafficking Victim Protection Act, and I went and testified to the Senate for the passage of that, and of course showed my movie. But that was not enough, because I had made a promise to the women who I worked with that I will come back and I will do whatever you want done after I've broken the silence and told your story in this documentary. So I went back to Mumbai with my award. And there I was on a bed in the brothel, and sometimes we would meet in a park nearby. And I told the women, here's the Emmy, here's the award, and I've broken the silence. The world knows about it. Things are being done. And they said, no, that's not enough. You have to do more. And I said, what can I do more? And they said that you can help us. And I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a teacher, I'm not even a social worker. I'm just a journalist who knows how to tell the story. And they said that, but you have a few things which we don't have. And I asked them what that was. And they said that you have knowledge of English, you have access to money and networks. We don't have any of that. Can you bring that to the table to help us? And I said, of course I can, and I will. But I reminded them of something in turn. When I was filming inside the brothels of Mumbai, a man had pulled out a knife at me. And he literally stuck it at my throat, and we were inside the small room, and there was only one exit, and he was blocking the exit, and there was one window with iron bars on it. And I thought, you know, I'm dead because now there's no escape route here. And I used to go into the brothels to film with no help of the police, and that time there were no NGOs working against sex trafficking. So the women came forward in that moment, and they surrounded me. And they said that if you want to kill her, you've got to kill us first, because we've decided to tell our stories. We want to save our daughters. And the man realized it was too much trouble to kill 23 women who were all sort of inside this room, jam-packed. And that's how my life was saved. But I also understood in that instance the power of collective action, the power of a community coming together and believing in something deeply enough to do something about it. And so I reminded the women of that moment, and I said that you have to also organize, and you have to fight for your own daughters and your own basic needs, and I will be an ally and I will help you. So they agreed, and together we formed the NGO, which Batia mentioned, Apne Aap, which means self-action in Hindi. Now, Apne Aap has 2 Hindi words and 2 English words. It's called Apne Aap Women Worldwide. The Hindi part, of course, all of you know, it's self-action, but women worldwide really means that we wanted solidarity with other women who were going through similar experiences, and also activists who were organizing across the world against sex trafficking. And we believed that we could work together to create this momentum. So we began, and I didn't even know how to make a business plan. And today's topic is, what can business do to end sex trafficking, human trafficking? And I didn't know in that moment how to make a business plan. So I, of course, decided to just ask the women. And I said, what do you want? And at that time, the women had 4 dreams. The first dream was they wanted education for their children, school, because they wanted their daughters to have a different future from what their own destiny had been. The second was they wanted a room of their own, which was Virginia Woolf to an English literature student sitting in a brothel in Mumbai. So because in a brothel district, imagine a red light district, 20 rooms to 1 toilet, chawls, a rickety staircase going up, only 1 exit, noise and sound 24/7, customers coming, vendors, alcohol, drugs, beds on bricks a little high so children can sleep on the floor beneath the beds while the customers come, fighting, haggling, crying, pain. And in the middle of this, the women saying, we want a room of our own. I could so understand that. The third dream the women wanted was they wanted a job in an office. And I've already described the red light area to you and the conditions that the women were in. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, of course, you want a job in an office which will have clean rooms, ventilation, no violence, fixed monthly income, maybe retirement funds, healthcare, you know. I could think about it. Maybe they didn't even have the imagination to think about all those things. But they knew they wanted a peaceful job. And the fourth thing they wanted was punishment of their perpetrators. Because they said, we want those who have brokered away our dreams, those who have bought us and sold us to be punished. And those 4 dreams became our business plan. We rented a room in the red light district and hired a teacher, put a straw mat on the floor and began teaching. As soon as the kids were ready for school, the principal of the local school said, I cannot admit them, their children are prostitutes. So then we said that we will now do our first collective action. And so we formed a mothers group and went to the principal, begged, cried, cajoled, and the principal relented. And fast forward, we have educated more than 3,000 children of red light areas, from red light areas, daughters and sons of prostituted women, mostly daughters, through school and college. Many have jobs as animation artists, pizza parlor managers, security guards, one's even a police officer, chef, all kinds of things. Teachers and doctors, of course, nurses. Also, we were able to start helping the women have hope, because when they saw the transformation in the daughters is when the women began to think, what about us? Is there a possibility that we can bring about change in our own lives? And we started organizing those mothers groups into small self-action groups and started helping them to access their rights through an approach which now I call the 10-asset approach. Now we have a business model and a business plan and all of that, which we didn't have in 2000. And those 10 assets became the business plan that the women obtained after joining an Apne Aap program, from a safe space to education to self-confidence to political knowledge, which is awareness of rights, but also ability to speak to authorities, from a bank manager to a local politician, to filling up government forms to get government IDs, because the people we were dealing with had no birth certificates or caste certificates or ration cards or anything. And then access to government subsidies and entitlements like low-cost food and housing and healthcare and education, which reduced their dependence on the brothel system if they were already trafficked, or created less risk if they were vulnerable to being trafficked. And then after that, we began to leverage this, because we realized that this is the time that exit can actually begin to happen. And that is when these women began to get pushback from the traffickers, who began to beat them black and blue. And so we began to connect them to legal training and legal clinics and lawyers, and teach them how to file a police complaint, speak in court, testify against traffickers. And we've managed to put more than 64 traffickers in jail in India now, and got the first life imprisonment of a trafficker in India through the advocacy and the tenacity and the courage of the women of Apne Aap. And then and after that, we realized that now the women are ready to step out of the red light areas. We have created a way for the women to hold on to the freedoms they have begun to acquire. And so that's when we opened savings and bank accounts and taught the women some kind of financial literacy. And then the 8th asset was income generating skills, the 9th asset, and the 10th is groups of friends of 10 each. So every woman had 9 other friends who would be their peer support, come what may. If someone was beating them up in the red light area, then 9 other women would stand with them. If the kerosene dealer would say, I will not give you kerosene because you're a prostitute, 10 women would show up together and say, we are entitled to this and you have to give it to us. So this is the business model we created over the years. And now we have community centers in different parts of India. And of course, our program has scaled and reached more and more women. And the red light area of Mumbai itself has shrunk. Many of you are from Bombay. And many of the brothels are sealed. We kept working with the police to raid the brothels and seal them because they were near a public place. We also worked with different NGOs, including an NGO called Prerna, which works in Bombay still, to get the kids into school, and the women organize and finding low-cost housing to move out of the red light area. So the red light area in Mumbai shrank, just as the red light area that I decided to then move into were the red light areas which were occupied and were caste settlements of nomadic groups trapped in intergenerational prostitution. And these groups really were those who were labeled as colonial tribes under British colonialism. And they were banned from living in forests. They were banned from moving from one place to another, even from wearing shoes or hats or riding horses. They were banned from owning land. They were banned from making their traditional products or selling them. So they didn't have land, they didn't have livelihoods, and they didn't have homes. So they ended up as squatters on government land or on zamindari land, land of the landlords. And in return, they had to perform the most menial chores, which included prostitution. The boys were forced to pimp their own sisters, and prostitution became intergenerational. So we decided that Bombay has now kicked in to do the work against trafficking. There's an ecosystem here, and we will move to these areas in Bihar and in the outskirts of Delhi, Rajasthan, Calcutta, and we began working there. Now, the reason I am telling you this story about the journey of mine and my NGO, why I became a lifelong activist, and why when Batia approached me and the Sani family approached me to give a lecture today about human trafficking, I chose to talk to you all on the subject of what can business do to stop human trafficking, rather than saying that how can my life be a source of inspiration or something like that, because I feel that there is unfinished business. You know, I'm a lifelong activist, and I have devoted every second of my day to thinking about what can be done to solve the problem. And because I have done that and I have created this family of choice, I have met other friends and allies in New York, in Washington, in Maine, in France, in UK, in Sweden, in Norway, across the world, who are doing exactly the same thing. We know we have made strides because we gave all 100% or maybe 150% to this struggle to create this world in which no human being is bought or sold. But now I find that what is happening right now is that while we are organized and we are working passionately, the traffickers are more organized. The sex industry has more resources. And they are always like not even one step ahead of us. With the growth of technology, they're like 20, 30, 40 steps ahead of us, I would say. And so since COVID, what I have noticed is that while we were working at the grassroots and getting girls into school and traffickers into jail, these traffickers were using online technology to recruit young people in such a big way that we could not keep up. They were grooming them, they were seasoning them. And what do I mean by grooming and seasoning? They would, kids were at home, teenagers, and they did not know how to cope with many of the issues when they were at home, which were issues of body shaming, which all of you know about is happening so much on social media because false images are projected, and girls and boys think that that is what they should look like, so they don't like what they see in the mirror. There was body shaming. Then there is bullying, which is so pervasive online. Then there is sexual abuse, where people tell kids, take off your shirt, and they do sexting, or they tape them and then blackmail them. And then, of course, leading to from on-site to online. And how does that happen? So after this process of seasoning and grooming, what is happening is that the traffickers then, through a series of fake profiles and using chatbots, they approach these kids and say, oh, you're having problems at home, complicated family relationships, betrayals in friendships, body shaming. We like you as you are. You're pretty, you're great, you're wonderful, and this and that. So they befriend these people and then slowly start getting them to perform sexual acts and then recruit them into the world of trafficking by saying, show up in this hotel room or show up in this party. And so trafficking has exploded in a big way. Now that is one part of it, the use of technology to target kids of a certain demographics using also AI, because they can actually process data at fast speed and find out which are the kids who are putting into their Insta profiles, I hate my parents, I want to commit suicide or whatever, and targeting such kids and then recruiting them through these fake profiles. But besides technology, what is also happening is that we know that there's a world right now full of war. There's Ukraine, there's the Middle East, there's all kinds of places where there's war right now. And there are huge populations which are absolutely vulnerable because there are no protection systems in place. And traffickers and organized crime, of course, move into such places. So at one point, just 2 years ago, the most trending word on internet was Ukrainian girls. And they take advantage of such situations. But besides that, what else do they take advantage of? To recruit. And this I would call to all the people sitting here is that who are business people is there is a supply side and there's a demand side. So on the supply side, what they look for is intersectionality. I use the term the last girl. And for me, on the supply side is the girl who is poor, who is female, who's a teenager. This is common across the world. In India, the girl recruited into prostitution is between 9 and 13, and in the United States, between 13 and 15. And the United Nations says of the victims of trafficking, the majority are women and girls, and even the women are recruited when they're teenagers. So you can imagine the scale of the problem that I'm talking about. So these are the people who are recruited on the supply side, poor female teenagers. And in India, they will be from an oppressed caste or community. In America, they'll be Black, Native American. In Europe, refugee, migrants, Africa from a marginalized ethnicity, Latin America, same. So we have these intersecting inequalities on the supply side. But what is really driving the industry? What is making sure that all these girls are actually tracked by these organized criminals who are going using technology, who are using physical deprivations to actually go and find these girls? It's the demand. And that is formed of the buyers and the business. The buyers are just regular men, and we have done so much research on this now across the world, who are married men in their 40s, not migrant workers that we would think, you know, the kind of people who would go to Kamtipura, but people who will go to hotel rooms, call girls into their homes, and find other such places. Married men, and normally in their 40s, and again, people who have regular jobs, who are asking for very young girls, fair-skinned girls, voluptuous girls, and all kinds of other things, which I don't even want to go into right now. But they are forming the demand. And then the traffickers, these organized criminal networks, see an opportunity, a business opportunity in this. And so they then begin to look for girls they can prey upon. And when they run out of Ukrainian girls, they will recruit girls online. The girl next door from Brooklyn or Queens or New York, anywhere. So this has been going on relentlessly. And when they see the demand is slipping, what do? They advertise. They have an advertising arm. And what is the advertising arm for this business? It's porn. So, you know, what they do is recruit very young boys when they're not even thinking about sex. You know, when they're just thinking, they're surfing the net to do their homework, and suddenly a cartoon character will pop up on their screen saying, "Want to have some fun with me?" And a couple of clicks later, they will see a young woman, you know, being abused in every part of her body, crying and saying, "Give me more." So that boy begins to think that no means yes, or yes means no, and pain is connected with violence and sex. So this is how they're grooming the demand from a very early age. Plus, of course, there's the glorification, right? So there are movies which will come again and again. You know, you'll have someone like a Richard Gere in Pretty Woman. And so you'll think it's all happy. You know, the happy hooker, the happy customer and all of that. But nobody knows the backstory behind what is going on. So this is how the demand is being created. And what we now need to go forward as we tackle this crime of sex trafficking, and we can tackle it because, you know, with this initial push which NGOs, activists, feminists, and civil society took and then got governments to join in, was that we have managed to at least shift the paradigm. Now, we don't use the word prostitute, we say victim of sex trafficking, or I say prostituted woman or prostituted child. We don't say prostitution so easily, we say sex trafficking. So we have managed to shift the paradigm, we have managed to change laws in many countries which go after the demand and increase choices for vulnerable populations of girls and women. But as I mentioned, the traffickers are way ahead of us. And we need allies from the business world to help us tackle sex trafficking. Now, what can business bring to the table? What can business do to end sex trafficking? There are, and I would say labor trafficking as well. On labor trafficking, there are 4 things that business can do which are super useful. Transparent supply chains. You know, because very often we know that the supply chains are not transparent enough, and contractors and subcontractors may be abusing someone, even using victims of trafficking, and we don't know. So we have to create much more transparent supply chains in business. The second thing that business can do is education and awareness. One is education and awareness, of course, of your own team members, because we know that some problems become chronic because nobody's talking about it. It's a silent problem. And you know, especially like big companies like Google and Facebook and all have huge populations, full campuses of young men who are just sitting on the computer from morning to night, you know, and alienated, and who knows what they're watching. And are they like that 12-year-old boy that they click and something is popping up and they're being groomed into becoming potential buyers? So what can big companies do? They can put up posters near the water cooler, but they can also create training programs. And we do talk about diversion and inclusion and diversity, but is there any way that we can also include training on sex trafficking for business team members? So education and awareness is the second thing that and there are companies who are taking this on. Amazon has begun to do this. IBM has begun to do this. There's also Delta has begun to do it. There are some companies who have begun to create a code of conduct for their staff, but also create training and awareness for staff. Then the third thing that business can do is invest. Because you know, the NGOs and the victims of trafficking, of course, are very resource strapped, and they are always trying to catch up with the organized crime of sex trafficking run by the sex industry, which is making billions of dollars. You know, one is through porn and the other is selling and buying kids. So we need at least something to be part of the, have a seat at the table at least, you know, because right now we are not even at the table to have this dialogue. So the third thing that business can do is invest in NGOs and on the issue of sex trafficking. Because, you know, many business people have been afraid in the past to invest in initiatives against sex trafficking because they think there's stigma. But the stigma is really that sex trafficking exists in our world right now. You know, it's like slavery existed in the 19th century. That was bad. And we challenged it, and we changed it. And, you know, there might be situations which are akin to slavery, but, you know, being a slave owner is not cool. So I think we have to change that. We have to bring about that shift, and business can do a lot to do that. The fourth thing that business can do really is corporate social responsibility initiatives have to include dealing with sex trafficking. Besides, you know, the foundations and the gifting that you do and the matching grants, etc., this can be a huge way of legitimizing initiatives and work against sex trafficking. So this is, I talked about it, I began with labor trafficking, but these are the four things. Now the fifth thing, which is specific to sex trafficking, of course, is the purchase of sex, right? And there is a culture in some businesses where escorts are provided in sales conferences, or you know, there's a culture where it's okay if you buy a girl, you know, must be an adult, she must be doing it willingly, choice or no choice. But that culture trickles down to that last girl I'm talking about, where somebody else is thinking, I can buy a girl too with impunity. So we need business to come forward to change that paradigm completely by ending that culture. There have to be other incentives to doing business than offering girls for sex and commodifying human beings in this day and this age. So these are the calls to action that I have to business. And one of the ways you can do it, because I have been traveling across the world talking to students with my book, I Kick and I Fly, about these issues. And the reason I have done it is that business must realize that by dealing with sex trafficking and the issues that I'm talking about, we are dealing with the future. Because if our societies are not stable, if our kids are broken, if organized crime is becoming more and more powerful, how can we do business in an unstable environment? And sex trafficking is creating that unstable environment, which you will be very happy to know that the city of Amsterdam, which had a red light district in one of its zones, has realized. You know, they thought that, oh, we are giving women better power and better status. And then they realized that organized crime prospered in their city. The kind of tourism which came to the city were all these people who were kind of shouting and screaming and drinking and buying girls. And many of the residents of the city couldn't even walk past the red light area. And there were girls in the shop windows who were on display who were trafficked, women from North Africa and Eastern Europe. And what it did was change the culture of the city, because other women were treated badly and disrespectfully because girls were available on sale in one part of the city. Plus, it led to money laundering and other crimes because there was cash exchanges. So Amsterdam slowly is now changing the red light area by buying back the brothels from the brothel owners and selling them to just regular retail outfits like Gucci and Prada, etc. So business can help and can do things, and people are beginning to realize why this is important. And why am I coming to you straight after a year-long book tour, going to young people across the world, from India to Paris to UK to America. I've spoken literally for 1 year in a different college or school every single week for 365 days, I think. And the reason I did that was because I realized our future is at stake. And young people from every walk of life who are going to schools of privilege. I went to Cathedral in Bombay. I went to Sophia College. I went to Mitabai College. I literally have been to all kinds of places. Everywhere, kids are going through the same thing, not in as extreme a way as I describe in my book, in I Kick and I Fly, but they are facing sexual abuse, they are facing body shaming and bullying, and we don't talk to them about it because we think secrets are better for them. But also we have created this overall culture where commodification of human bodies is okay, and kids are being victimized about that. So it's one thing to blame social media for mental health issues among our kids or young adults, or COVID and the lockdown. Yes, those are contributing factors, but one of the things is this overall culture that we are allowing to exist with impunity, because we are allowing that last girl to be commodified, but by the commodification of that last girl, we are allowing this culture to exist. And that is why business has to come forward to create a stable world and to also invest in the future to tackle human trafficking. And I just want to end by reading a little extract from my book, and then I'm open to Q&A because I think I'll give you a flavor. My book is called I Kick and I Fly, and it's a young adult book that I wrote during the lockdown when I read about what young people were going through, because I wanted to share a story of hope and truth with the world. And I had one, the kids that I spoke about who I had educated through my NGO in schools and colleges and who had jobs. But there were pivotal moments which happened, and those pivotal moments led to the change. And I thought that this is why we need to reach out where we can, and I wrote a fiction story because I wanted people to have empathy for the last girl and be able to connect to her feelings and her emotions and not see her as a cardboard creature who's in Pretty Woman or standing on a street with painted lips. She's a human being with a big story behind her. So I will read you an extract where this little girl called Hira. She's a 14-year-old girl from a nomadic tribe, and she is about to be sold into the sex trade when the carnival comes to town, because her community, her tribe, this nomadic tribe, is trapped in intergenerational prostitution. She's expelled from school for stealing an egg because her mother is hungry at home and she takes this egg from the midday meal program. And a women's rights advocate says, I can enroll you back into school and also teach you how to fight properly so that you can do something. But Hira is scared to go to school because she thinks that she believes in a superstition in her entire lane called Girls' Bazaar, that girls in this tribe are destined for prostitution. But her elder sister, Miradi, says, no, you've got to try differently, because Miradi has been subjected to sex trafficking and knows what it's like. So it's a conversation between Miradi and Hira. What if everyone in Girls' Bazaar, Chacha and Baba, are right? What if I will bring bad luck to the family? I voice my doubts aloud. This grabs Miradi's attention. Since when did you begin to believe in this superstitious nonsense? I don't meet Miradi's eye, focusing instead on Jamila Bua as she fries the onion pakoras for the lunchtime rush. A black crow drives a sparrow away from the garbage. It's a stark reminder that the mightiest will survive, that destiny decides who will be mighty. It's the way of the world, Miradi. If destiny hasn't decided where I was born, who has? It's all a birth lottery, I say bitterly, walking up and down inside the small space of our shack. Miradi comes and hugs me. She strokes my head. I know you feel frustrated, but do you have a choice? What else can you do if you don't go back to school? I steer the conversation away from destiny. In my heart, I know that I don't believe the superstitions. All the women in our lane believe in the eternal, inescapable fate of our nomadic nut tribe because they can't imagine anything beyond it. There was no defiant mother or cousin or sister or rights activist to fight for them. I decide to spell out my other fear. What if I don't understand anything? There, I've said it. I don't want to be the stupidest kid in class. Miradi looks at me with no expression on her face. Then her brow furrows. As far as I remember, you did fine in school, at least when you were a kid. You used to get the highest scores for reading aloud in Hindi and English. I couldn't tear you away from the school library. I smile back. I did love the dusty library, the smell of books, the stories I read in the privacy of the desk between the shelves by the window, Tagore, Sharat Chandra, Mahadevi Verma, and even the adventure stories by Enid Blyton and Laura Lee Hope. Words used to come easily to me. Then came the hunger, the bullying, the chores at home, my first menstruation. Everything slipped away. Can't you help me, Miradi? Do you think I remember anything after the hell I've lived through these past few years? There's an aggressive edge to Miradi's voice. I see a small, warm spark of hope fight the fear in her eyes. Under her clumsy makeup is a desperate appeal. I look at her and remember her full-throated and happy laugh as a girl. I resolve I will overcome my fears for her. Outside, the sky is grey, the sun sending out weak rays through the mist. Far off, a train whistle blows. I give Miradi's hand a squeeze. I promise I will go and meet Rinidhi, who has promised to get me back into school. I want to anyway. Miradi smiles. She gets up to go. She can't stay too long in case Chotu or Shaukat start looking for her as soon as a new client appears. I'm going to send word to Rinidhi that you will go to her tomorrow, she says as she ties a scarf around her head. Her body language changes. She stiffens, drawing in her shoulders as she walks away. Selfishly, perhaps, I realize that I'm not going to do this just for her. I want to be a person. I want to kick and fly. I want to win. I want to have the courage to demand a life without fear.
We can take maybe just a couple of questions if folks want to just raise hands. Anything.
My name is Ashna. Thank you so much for coming and really impressed by your talk. I think a lot of us here are students and we want to make a change and help this like connection. But obviously like when starting our careers we don't have that much disposable income. So how would you suggest we can help and kind of contribute to like this?
So, there are lots of campaigns which are student-led and student-driven, which you can join against sex trafficking. There's an organization called World Without Exploitation. They have a whole association for students on campus, and you can join that. The other thing you can do is intern, donate your time to NGOs like Apne Aap, Sanctuary for Families, and many others, because we're always looking for work, and we take interns as well, so you can donate your time. The third thing you can do is learn about the issue. You can, one of the things, of course, you can do is buy a book like this, read it, but not just read it, pay it forward by giving it to somebody else to read who might find some answers or learn about the issue of sex trafficking. And then after that, you can spread awareness by organizing programs on campus, a movie screening, a book reading, a play, inviting a speaker from an NGO to speak about the subject. You can even invite survivors who are looking for paid engagements to go and speak on campus about their experience, so that we really know and believe what is going on in the world of sex trafficking. And then, of course, you can also, donate time and resources. So these are the 4 things that you can do: learn, spread awareness, volunteer, donate time and resources.
I mean, I'd like to ask a question. First of all, thank you very much for being the speaker this year. You've been fantastic. And although you said you didn't want to be an inspiring speaker and you wanted a call to action, you were inspiring. So thank you for that. And your life story is inspiring. So you talked about this technology and you can't keep up with technology. And so how much is technology to blame, or the companies that run that technology? So for example, like Facebook, Instagram, whatever, the Meta, what can they do better? I mean, they're trying to tell the lawmakers that they're doing what they can and they're screening and whatever they can up to personal privacy concern, in that sort of window of personal privacy that they have to respect too. But maybe they need to do more. And what can they do more possibly, to do that?
Yeah, so, they are not doing enough at all. In fact, they're ignoring and they're almost in denial about how their platforms are being used. You might have heard of OnlyFans. You might have read about bills which are pending in Congress and Senate. FOSTA and SESTA have also been there. So people are trying to hold Meta accountable for how children are actually losing self-esteem and this, mental health crisis that we have in America and the world right now because of these body shaming, sexual abuse, and bullying issues online. And they haven't allowed filters to exist. So one is, of course, they can use technology better to safeguard kids, but the other is that don't allow some companies to use their platform at all. But they're allowing it because precisely that this sex industry has so much money that they are greedy. And somewhere we have to put like a boundary to our greed, As Gandhi said, there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. So I think we really need, it's a wake-up call. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has brought out a report last year which says that teen mental health is the biggest epidemic in America right now. And 1 in 5 girls is reporting that she wants to commit suicide. And the root causes are, of course, bullying, body shaming, and sexual abuse, both in school and online. So, yeah, they definitely have to do more. And I know we don't have too many questions, but there's one thing I wanted to end with. Do I have closing remarks?
Sure.
Okay. Or do we have...
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay.
You have the mic on.
I have the mic, it's true. As we end the evening today, I would just want to say a huge thank you to the Sani family for inviting me to give this lecture to all of you. I met Suresh just 2 days ago, but I've been in touch with Batia and the Stern School for Business and Society on this lecture. And you know, this is something else that business can do, is create platforms to spread awareness and take on initiatives. Because not only have you brought me to give this lecture, Suresh, I know you've made a real effort to bring people from the business world into this room. And that is super helpful. And so I want to thank the Sani family for instituting this lecture and for inviting me as a speaker. And I want to thank Batia and the Stern School of Business and Society for hosting it. Thank you.